name is Ted Bernhard, and I am the managing director of the Portland office of Cultiva Law. I think the biggest challenge in this industry right now has to do with bringing sort of the expertise and professionalism in terms of the business documentation and negotiations that has been developed in other industries into this industry, which is really an emerging industry where a lot of the people have been operating without the proper legal framework or regulatory environment or whatever. And so, it's really important to work with a law firm that has that sort of general business experience, because a business is a business, and being able to apply the expertise that's been developed elsewhere, other industries, and before this to newly forming businesses can prevent a lot of problems in the future. So I think that's important. I think it's really important actually to work with a dedicated cannabis law firm, and that's actually our philosophy at Cultiva, is to maintain that focus exclusively on the cannabis industry. And the reason that we do that is this is a dynamic industry that is changing really fast from a regulatory environment. There's already a complex patchwork of rules at the federal, the local, the state level. And the challenge is that they're changing so fast that if you're not immersed in the industry on a day-to-day basis, you're really not doing your clients any service because of the fact that by the time you're giving them advice, it might be out-of-dated. And there's a lot of people that are sort of dabbling in this who are general corporate practitioners or business law practitioners, and they are able to give good business advice, but in terms of staying on top of all the changes with the FDA, with the local and state regulations and things like that, unless you have a team of people dedicated to doing that, it's really hard to keep up with. And so that's our philosophy, is sort of bringing business expertise and high quality, general business advice and professionalism to this industry, and also providing the ability to stay current with all the changing of regulations and navigate the complexities of that. So that's kind of our thinking on that. And it seems to be working pretty well. It's fun to have a whole team of people just dedicated to keeping up with what the FDA is doing and things like that. So, and that's another thing that's good about being with a firm rather than just a solo practice. You have people that specialize in different things. Like, for example, trademarks is becoming a hot issue in the cannabis, and particularly the CBD side of things. And so we have an intellectual property expert on staff that's dedicated to that. And so I can focus on the general business stuff, they can focus on the IP, and other people can focus on the regulatory concerns. So it's a team approach too. Yeah, so the most obvious and the first mistake that we always see is people entering into handshake deals without papering the deals and consulting with their lawyers first. It may seem like the easy thing to do when you start off, but you're going to end up either in a dispute or redoing it down the road anyway. And so, it's very important to take that initial step and reach out to a lawyer and do that. So that's one thing. Another thing that I think a lot of people run into is there's always control issues with newly formed businesses, and it's a balancing act between maintaining control of your business, but also giving up enough control that you're able to raise successful investment capital. And a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, err on one side or the other of that. They either give away too much of the company in the process of trying to attract investors and be appealing to them, or they hold on to the control so tightly that they really rule out a lot of people that could be investors in the process of doing that. And so it's definitely a balancing act that people need to focus on, understanding how to protect yourself adequately while also keeping a long-term vision that includes financing from outside investors. And that's kind of what a lot of the initial discussions that I have with businesses are, is how do you find that balance of control and making sure that you can operate efficiently, but making yourself an appealing target to investors so that you can grow rapidly enough to keep up with the economic opportunities. So I'd say those are sort of the two biggest ones. First of all, one thing that I think they did right was I think that they allowed outside investment into the community, which opens up the capital markets to get these businesses financed and off the ground. So I think that's a good thing. I think it was tough that they didn't put a limit on the number of licenses that they were going to grant, because now we have this gigantic oversupply problem that we're still kind of wrestling to deal with. And the biggest one that I keep hearing from people out of state about is the social consumption issues that keep coming up. It's very difficult to have any sort of event or club or you can't have anything attached to a retail location or anything like that. And it was a weird intersection of the marijuana regulations and the anti-smoking Indoor Air Act regulations, but we've kind of messed that up where we've made it legal to grow, to produce, to sell, and consume, but we've limited people to consuming it just in residential houses rather than at any sort of facility or event or things like that. So that's something that I think Oregon has a long way to go on. The other thing that I would say that Oregon has done really well on is getting ready for exports to emanate from the state. Obviously, Oregon has a competitive advantage because of the climate, because of the culture, because of the expertise that we have here to produce really high quality product. And so the legislation that just passed in June of this year, focusing on the export opportunities, I think is a huge thing that Oregon has done right, and it's going to pay dividends over the next few years as more and more people get on board with that. So I think that's an exciting thing. But the social consumption one is something that really needs to be addressed better, I think. An intimate part of the process is dealing with the local land use authorities, and so a lot of the power in terms of getting a land use certificate and how the business is actually structured and operated resides with the counties, and so those officials have a lot of power that is reflective of the political environment in those various counties. My firm doesn't really get into the specifics of like county by county differences because we don't do land use planning and things like that. But there are definitely differences. I mean, the one difference that I see, there's a huge rural-urban divide. And the perception of the way people view cannabis is really becoming more and more pronounced between those two sectors of the economy. And part of what I try and do is I try and bridge the gap between the farmers and the producers and the rural parts of the state who really have the hands-on expertise to grow their products and develop a really high product, but are maybe uncomfortable with or intimidated by, people who aren't tied to the land, who are in more of the urban centers and the financial centers, and find a way to get those people communicating with each other and bridging the gap between the urban and rural divide to, come together for a growth opportunity basically for these businesses that wouldn't be available if they both just stayed in their own little silos. So that's kind of where more of my focus is on, not dealing individual county by county, but more sort of dealing with the cultural differences between the different parts of the states.